We are learning about the father of genetics. We had 5, now we have 3. Good morning, Alex. Morning, Ayana. What, did you just say good morning, Twylos?
No, this is the video.
If you wake up, JC, beat you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Just stay up, loser. Okay, we'll wait another minute or so
I'm gonna beat you up.
for any stragglers and for Ayana. So as we prepare, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you had a chance to look at the stuff that I posted. I apologize that I posted a little oddly. I made a mistake when I was scheduling it for the 11th graders. So what if we haven't read the article yet? Well, Giovanni, obviously you haven't, punk. That's okay. If you haven't read the article yet, that's fine. That's fine, Natalie. If you haven't read the article yet, that's okay. Because the idea is we're going to go over some stuff today. Make sure what you are doing is there's, I think today there is one. Yes, there is. Later, like as soon as you're done, there's a survey and like a mini quiz. It'll ask a couple questions about what we're going to go over. As well as, drop my marker, as well as we're going to go over, it's going to ask you about some percentage things, some SAT percentage things. Carlos, no. It's going to ask you about some SAT percentage things just to check and make sure how we're feeling about those, because we do want to continue to work with those skills. I know SAT is going to be postponed, but there will be some of you who choose to take it over the summer, and if you don't take it over the summer, but we end up taking it in the fall, or if it still isn't, if it's still in June, I'm not sure. I think a May one was postponed, so I don't know exactly how SAT is going to work. But either way, when you take it, I want to make sure that you're 100% ready for it. So if you didn't read the article because you're like Giovanni, the thing that I want to start you with is, of course, we're talking about Gregor Mendel. You've heard of Mendel. I'm sure at some point you've had a class where you talked about him. But Mendel is referred to as the father of genetics. So he was a monk, so he didn't have much to do. He had a lot of time. He was a very particular type of person, and what you may or may not remember is Mendel studied pea plants. So I don't know how many of you in a class I might ask, like, how many of you like peas? How many of you are allergic to peas? Only my children's mother? Oh. I personally like peas, whatever. But there's a reason that he studied peas, and it's not just because he found peas, because he enjoyed peas, but it was because peas, one, plants go through generations relatively quickly. That's the important thing. Plants go through generations very, very quickly. And so what you're able to do is go from generation 1 to generation 2 in a matter of weeks, whereas with humans, you're talking about 22 years. Now, Mendel was very, very particular, which was important because of the type of work that he would do. Now, the other reason for choosing peas is peas have a lot, and we're not going to talk about all of them, but they have a lot of traits, characteristics, that are controlled by a single allele, right? So it's a single gene. So you're talking about the color of the seeds. Do you have yellow peas or green peas? You're talking about the shape. Are they round or are they wrinkly? And those are the two that we mostly get talked about. But there's also the height of the plant. Is it a tall plant? Is it a short plant? Flower color and other things that we'll look up. But those were the important ones. Now what he would do is he would take little cloth bags and he would tie them over every flower on the plant to keep them from cross-pollinating. And by doing this, what he was able to do is make what's known as a purebred. Now, what a purebred meant was that if he had a plant, hopefully this shows up, this is a much lighter green than it purported to be. If he had a plant that had green pea seeds, he knew that this was, that it was, we'll say lowercase y, right? He knew that it was lowercase y. He knew what its, well, he might not have known the genetics of it, but he knew that it was purebred. He knew that this one only had the genetics to make green peas because he would crossbreed only green peas. And then he would do the same. I'm not going to draw a yellow pea because I feel that you can hardly see that. I feel that if I could do a yellow one, you won't see it. So he knew that if he did yellow plants, by tying them off and not allowing them to just breed with whatever, he was able to have plants that only made yellow peas. So, once he had done this, once he had gone through his breeding of these plants, what he did is, let's say he was taking pea color. So he would take a green pea, a plant that made green peas, right? And he crossbred this plant that made green peas with a plant that only made, yeah, we'll see how it shows up. How does that show up, Ayana? At all?
What do you want it to roll?
What?
It shows up a bit.
Okay. So he, maybe if I do it closer. Wow. He'd take his plant that only made yellow peas, and his plant that only made green peas. And what he found is he got, what color peas did he get? What color peas did he get? It's a question. What do you get? What do you get? If you did the reading, this is where we'll see if you did the reading. Does anybody know what color peas he got? Now I have to wait because of the delay. We know Giovanni doesn't know because we know he didn't do the reading. Ayana, do you know?
No,
You don't know what color peas he got?
no. We just talked about his ideas, not what you did.
Giovanni says yellow. Oh. Jonathan's looking at my shirt. Hi, Melanie. Okay, so in the reading, you'll know what color peas he got. So, not a lot of us on top of that reading. Do the reading. What you notice is any time when you crossbreed, though, I'll tell you this: the dominant stays, right? The dominant stays, and it's the recessive that doesn't show up. Okay. Now, eventually, what he noticed, and I'm going to do something different than peas because I want you to do the reading. That's why. So please do the reading. So let's say tongue rolling, the ability to roll one's tongue. And if you remember, Ayana, can you roll your tongue? Can you fold your tongue over? Wow, I can't do that. So, Ayana, Carlos, can you fold your tongue?
What do you mean?
Like into like a taco shape? Yeah, come do that in front. Come do that. Just do it for the camera so everyone knows what I mean when I say fold your tongue. Do it. Okay, so I can't do that. See, look here. That's it. That's all I can do. He can do it. I can't do that. So what we know is tongue rolling
It's very hot in the room.
is a dominant trait. Okay, so it's dominant. So if you have somebody who can't roll their tongue, that's me. I'm a non-roller. And somebody who can, what you'll see every time, well, not every time, but what you'll see, if this is a purebred, so they can completely roll it, then every time their offspring will be able to roll. So dominant and recessive, right? Now, when we show dominant and recessive, we do show these, and hopefully you've heard about these. We show these using capital letters. So a dominant allele is going to be expressed by a capital letter. And in this case, since we're talking about tongue rolling, we're going to talk about a capital T, right? And this is the gene. This is the genotype, right? So let's say I have a person who's purebred, meaning they can completely roll their tongue. This would be their genotype. Do we understand why there's two? Why there's two T's and not one T? Lewis, why are there two T's, not one T? Or do we need me to roll back a little bit? I'll roll back a little bit. I'll roll back a little bit. So let's say this. So here's my kid's mother. And here's me.
People have said parents.
Parents, exactly. Yes, so here's my kid's mother, here's me, and we'll call this Ayana.
You'll love to see it.
So when it comes to rolling, to the ability to roll our tongue, I can't do it. It's a recessive trait, and since it's recessive, I have lower cases. So I gave Ayana a lowercase t. She's not able to roll her tongue, if this was all she had. But her mother, now we don't know if she's heterozygous, or we'd have to go back more, but from her mother, she got a capital T. And since she has a lowercase and a capital T, that means she's able to roll her tongue. Because the dominant, the way that to think about it is the dominant gets its way, right? A dominant allele, it gets its way. So if the dominant allele is for tongue rolling, it gets its way. If the dominant allele is for the color of a pea seed, the dominant allele gets its way if it's there, right? It's kind of like, a person with a dominant personality, like Mr. Lay? Not really. But it's like if two people want something, there's always that person who, they have to get their way, right? The dominant allele gets its way. So if the dominant allele codes for the ability to roll your tongue, brown eyes, in the presence of that dominant allele, that's what's always going to show up. And now, what Mendel found in his studies is, one, if I take two purebred, so I take dominant allele things, right? That every time, let's say that all of their offspring will have this. So in there, if this is the parents, where they're what we call homozygous, homo meaning same, and zygous meaning the zygote or the allele. So if they're homozygous, their children will all be heterozygous, and if their children are heterozygous, only the dominant trait will show up. This one will be lost in that generation. You won't see it. So if Carlos and Ayana's mother and I had 80 children, that's a lot of kids, but if we had 80 children, and if she still had and if she was homozygous dominant, none of the children, all of the children would be able to roll their tongue. Now, what Mendel also found is when you have hybrid, or heterozygous, so when you have a cross between heterozygous, right? When you have a cross between heterozygous, what he found is you end up with a ratio of 3-to-1 dominant versus recessive. Dominant versus recessive. Does anybody know how we find out, how we can test this 3-to-1? What we use? What we use? What thing that has a shape in its name? Do we know? What time is it?
14.
No watches. Oh, I didn't. Roll back, please. Not rolling back.
That was
Punnett
earlier.
square. Okay. It was what?
That was earlier.
Oh, okay. So a Punnett square. So what we'll do is if we know that we have two heterozygous parents, so we know we have, this is exactly what we'll do. Now, when we're setting up a Punnett square, I don't know why they do it, but they put the father on top and the mother on the side. And you put one allele over each box when you're only focusing on the one allele, because you put the different allele combinations. So what I would say is over here, we'll say father. If the father is this, then the possible things that he can give to his child, these are the possible gametes, okay? This is his genotype. Sorry, this is the genotype. These are the possible gametes. So over here we put the gametes. And you know what? They're the same for both mother and father, so I'm going to write genotype here. Genotype. And then they'll be the same. So then if I go over and I just drop down, first I'll drop down, come over, drop down, come over. And you always write the capital. If you have both a capital and a lowercase, you have heterozygous, you always write the capital letter first. Don't ask why, just do it. So we see when we do this, we have one, if we're looking at genotypical ratios, meaning, so genotype, the ratio, we have capital T equals 1. Heterozygous equals 2. And homozygous recessive equals 1. But all of these will show the dominant trait. So phenotype, the ratio is going to be 3 to 1. Does anybody know what phenotype means? I wrote that really sloppily. I'm going to rewrite it. I don't like how it looks. Phenotype. Any responses yet on the phenotype question?
Guess not. Bro.
Whoa. I don't know. Do you know what phenotype is?
Yay, it's physical.
Physical. Physical, yes, Louis. Phenotype is the physical representation of the genotype, right? So genotype in this case, the genotype would be, let's say, for me, it's 2 lowercase t's. That's my genotype. And phenotype, the physical characteristic, Jonathan, the physical representation, means I cannot roll my tongue, right? Because the children are heterozygous for it, it means that they can roll their tongue. Yeah, pheno, that features, physical, we're talking about the outward presentation of the genetics, right? The genes, right? So this is my phenotype. It's the outward presentation of all the genetics that make up who I am in my DNA. So, one of the things in the reading, you might hear about the phrase dihybrid cross. This is what is called a monohybrid cross. It means we have a hybrid, or a heterozygous, it's got 2, on one gene. That's monohybrid. Dihybrid cross would mean if we're looking at 2 genes at once. We're not going to do that right now. So if you read about dihybrid, just be like, oh, that's next unit. That's the next unit. Ah, away. Leave me. Bleh. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about what we've covered so far in this? Do you have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to take it that means there are no questions. Very important that you make sure you have the work done, make sure you have everything up to this point. I'd say try to get things done, get the survey part definitely done today. Try to get anything else that's been assigned up till now done by week's end so that I can go through everything over spring break next week, which is just a weird thing to say, spring break next week. But yeah, I won't be. Reminder, we're about to do something else, but reminder, and I'll say it again, I will not be posting new academic content, and I will not be posting assignments during spring break. What I will be doing is apparently I will be making pasta and also jiggly cheesecake. We'll be making those. So if you want to see how that goes, join us. What I do want to talk about is a little bit about percent, because there are 2 questions about percent, and we struggled a little bit with some of the percentage problems on the last interim. And the reason we had a couple of issues with those, I think, is because we often neglect to read the full problem, right? So what we're going to want to remember is, if I say something increased by 50%, right? It went up by 50%. That means it's at its original and then 50%. If I say it was 150% greater, right? Then that would be, it's really, I think a lot of the issues that we have with percentage problems are really, are we paying a lot of attention to A, what the question is asking, and B, how it's asking it. Now, the real downside to the 2 questions that I've put on there, they were actually, they were questions that were going to be for the formative assessment the week of the shutdown. We were actually supposed to take it that Friday. I really do think a lot of you are going to do really well on it, because you do very well, again, you do very well with math when you have time. When you struggle is when you're pressed up against the clock. You don't have a lot of time. You're really trying to push it, and you're trying to get through things. So I really want to stress, continue to practice math. I am going to continue more and more pushing it forward. When we get back after break, we're going to stick with the same class format we have. What I might do a little bit differently is, even though I will have math problems on the questions, on your weekly quizzes, I'll go over one sample probably in the video that I post on Tuesdays. Wednesdays I'll take a couple minutes and go over one, and then your weekly quiz, you'll actually do some math practice just to see how we're feeling about it. Yeah, but that's about it. If you have any questions, please let me know. One of the important things is, even though I said I'm not going to be posting academic content, what I mean by that is there's nothing that you're going to be responsible for over that spring break period, which is next Monday to next Friday, right? However, if you do have questions about things, if there's something that you're struggling with understanding, I will gladly hop on the internet, either post a video, hop on Zoom with you in like a small group or one-on-one setting, whatever is necessary, right? Whatever it takes to help you out, that's what I will do. If we don't have any other questions, then fantastic. Go ahead, make sure, as you can log off this video as soon as it ends. Go ahead, take that survey. Make sure that you understand all the material that was covered. Some of those questions you might have to look back at the video, do a little rewatch. But I don't think so. I think you've got it up here. And then I will see you next week as we, if you're interested in doing some cooking with us. All right. If nothing else, I will see you in a couple weeks after spring break's over. Have a wonderful time. Hope everything is going well. So how's life, Mr. Lay? It's wonderful, Giovanni. It's wonderful. If you showed up more when we have just random videos of nothingness, I'd tell you. You were on the stream the whole time. Love you too. Make sure you take the survey, everybody, so I know, so I can give everybody credit. See ya.